So in this tutorial, we're going to go over how to use QPainter and how to establish Q brushes and use them to paint different objects in your QGraphics scene. Let's get started. So I'm just going to create a Q widget application. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and call it simulation. That's what I want this project to be called. Alright, leave that on QMake. Okay, for this section, let's inherit the base class from QDialog. I'm going to go ahead and change the name of my class, and I will also call it simulation. Go ahead and make sure that generate form is clicked so that we create a UI file. That way we can just go ahead and add a graphics view directly without having to add one in the header file. Okay, leave that empty. Okay, select whatever kit you're going to use. I only have this one available, so I'm going to hit next. Alright, make sure all your files are there and hit finish. Okay, excellent. So everything has loaded up. Now, when you go ahead and run this, you will simply get an empty window. There's nothing interesting about it. Okay, but at least you don't have to create this from scratch. It's because you created the base class, or you created your program using the base class QDialog. Great. So let's go ahead and move over to the simulation header file. As you can see, we got some pretty standard stuff. Okay. In order for me to be able to draw or paint, we are going to need to have a QGraphics scene, but before we do that, we have to add a QGraphics view. So let's double click, and you see what I did here. I double clicked on simulation UI. So I move over to my UI file. Then I'm going to go ahead and click on graphics view, and I'm going to drag that in. Excellent. Now it's a little hard to see on my screen simply because everything is a bit dark. However, you can see the outline of the graphics view. I'm just going to go resize that about this amount or so. Now feel free to use the geometry and set any horizontal, vertical policies. Set the minimum size and maximum size of the graphics view and the window if you so choose to. Remember, the window will have its own size, and depending on how big you want the graphics view, you can go ahead and modify the values down here. I will leave mine like this. Once this is ready, you can run this, okay, and you will see that you now have some type of a canvas, more or less, that's available for you to use. And I'm going to go back to the header file, and this is the moment where we create the graphics scene, or at least we're going to declare one. QGraphicsScene, QGraphicsScene, okay, and then the name of the scene, which I will simply call scene. Great. Now, if you get an error like this, it's because it doesn't recognize that class. So I'm simply going to include QGraphicsScene in here. Oh. Include and QGraphicsScene. There it is on the second one. Hit enter. Okay, now that it is loaded, I must add it to my program. Now before we do that, we must define what type of scene this is going to be and who the parent of the scene will be. We already have the scene object declared in the header file, so all we must do now is call on that scene object by typing scene. We will say scene equals a new QGraphics scene, right? And in here, we are simply going to say that the parent is going to be the UI QGraphics view. Okay, at the end of that, make sure you have your semicolon. Excellent. Okay, the scene has been created, but as you may have already guessed, it has no parameters. And I appear to have accidentally erased a bracket, so let's put that back. There we go. Alright, next up, it's time to set the geometry or set the size of the scene So that way the program knows exactly where it will be sitting. Now for our purposes, we are simply going to place this at the 0, 0 position. Okay, that'll be at the top left corner of the QGraphics view, or of the graphics view. And in order to do so, I will type scene dot set scene rect. There we go. Now I can go ahead and type the numbers in directly. I can say 0, 0. And I can give it a size of my choosing for the moment. Again, I'm not too interested in the size of this scene at the moment, since all we care about is painting for now. So I'm going to go ahead and make this a 600 by 600. Excellent. There we are. Okay. Now that the scene has some sort of geometry, it is time to tell our program that our UI will have a scene. See, the UI holds the or the graphics view, the QGraphics view. However, the QGraphics view does not know that it has a scene yet. So all we have to do is say access the QGraphics view, say graphics view, okay, dot. And what happened there? Okay, set the scene. And now I'm going to tell it to use the scene that we have defined above. And there we go. Great. So all of this will happen in your constructor, meaning that every time you run the program, this all will be executed. So now let's hit run. Okay. And nothing really changed. I have this little scroller bar. Let's see, because I didn't necessarily adjust the window to not have it. However, I'm not too worried about that for the moment. As you can see, since this window is still adjustable, you may get a little scroller that's saying, hey, the scene is a little too large for the view at the moment. Okay, but again, I'm not too concerned about that for now. Okay, now it's time to add an object to this. Let's go back to the scene, or to the simulation header file. Void, and I'm going to call this draw. I guess I can call it draw objects for now. I'm not very creative with these names, so let's continue. Alright, for the next part, I'm simply going to go ahead, right click, hit refactor, and then add definition in simulation.c++. So let's hit there. Okay, now that's a very neat trick because it allows you to just create the function definition in the C++ file, and all you have to do is fill it in with whatever you need. Excellent. So for now, I'm going to go ahead and get started with the painting by first creating what we call a brush. In order to do this, I'm going to type QBrush. Okay, this is going to be an instance of a brush. So all I'm going to do next is type the name of the brush. So I'm not, like I said, very creative with names, so I will just call it brush. Now, as far as the constructor goes, all I have to do is feed it whatever parameters this might need. A brush is going to need a color. So I'm going to go ahead and use some RGB values using the QColor method. And then I will say, let's go with 100, 255, 100. Excellent. So we have a brush. Let's also add a pen. So we'll do the same thing, create an instance of a pen, QPen. Whoops. Let's call it pen. And in the constructor, I will give it a color as well. So if you don't already know, the brush is what's going to be used to fill in the object, and the pen will simply be used to color the outline of the object or the shape. So for this one, we will also need some color. Okay. I'm just going to go with full black for this, so 000 for the RGB value. Okay, so now you have a brush and you have a pen. Alright, for the next section, we're simply going to create an object that we can pencil in or fill in with our brush and our pen. So we can do this in one of many ways. I can create a QRect and maybe fill it in with a brush, or I can just create a QGraphics item, for example, an ellipse or a rectangle. For now, I think I'm going to go with the ellipse. So let's begin. Let's say QGraphicsEllipse item. Okay. And we're going to create one ellipse here. So this is going to be called ball. Now here's a constructor. This is going to be a new QGraphicsEllipse item. QGraphicsEllipse item. Okay. Great. Now again, my QGraphicsEllipse item is going to need some form of geometry, so a position and a width and a height. Okay, so I will feed it those parameters in a moment, but if you get this error, it's because our program does not know what a QGraphicsEllipse item is. So I'm going to have to go back to the header file to include that library. So over here at the top, okay, we're going to start by saying, hey, I'm going to need a QGraphics item in general. Okay. Let's go take a look, see if that was resolved. And there it is. Great. Okay. So my QGraphicsEllipse item, again, needs a geometry. So I can set it up directly by punching some numbers, or I can create a QRect item and feed it in as the base rectangle that it's going to use. Now, when I say a rectangle, it simply means that every object requires some type of boundary, whether that be a polygon, an ellipse, a rectangle, triangle, whatever you want. It will need certain boundaries. And the Qt framework likes to use a rectangle. Now, whether that entire rectangle is filled in, that doesn't actually matter or make any difference, again, because this is more of a construct that will just be used for boundaries. You can fill it in, or you can draw other types of shapes inside of this rectangle. So we're just going to add the numbers directly by saying that we're going to put our ellipse at the 300 mark. Okay, and let's give it a width and a height. Okay, now the width and the height is the width and height of the rectangle that will house this ellipse. Okay, so if I say that this is going to have a 200 for the width and a 200 for the height, that is the same thing as me saying that it has a diameter of 200, or it's the same as me radius of 100. Okay, now that our ellipse item has been created, it is time to add it to the scene. So all I'm going to do is say scene dot add item. Okay, now obviously we need one object, at least one object to put in here. So I'm going to say include the ball, or put the ball in the scene, and that's that. Now I'm just going to run that function one time in the constructor, and we will be looking for an ellipse to show up at the 300 position. And there it is down here. Okay, there is the ellipse item. It's kind of tough to see because it's black outline and my background is kind of dark. However, let's fix that by filling in the ellipse before we add it to the scene. So now that we already have a pen and we have our ellipse item in there, what I'm going to do is say, hey ball, you're gonna set a brush, and you're going to use the brush that has been defined. I will tell it to use the brush that we defined earlier. Great. So now that it has a brush, when it is added to the scene, the ball will be filled in with the color that I specified in here. Let's see. Let's take a look. And there it is. I honestly did not exactly know what color that would be, but I figured it'd be somewhere in the green range. Alright, now that is one of the most basic ways of painting a QGraphics item.